Hello, good people. Todd Shannon, data scientist, social commentator, getter of buckets. What are we talking about today? Apparently, down in Florida, they love them some slavery. Apparently, they think slavery is a good thing. I think right now they are proposing legislation to put us back in chains, like Joe Biden said, so that we could reap all those good benefits from slavery because, apparently slavery is a good thing. Or this is what the Democrats say. Now, if you believe that, I've got some swampland in Florida I'd like to sell you, and apropos, because, most of the swampland is in Florida. And Florida tends to be where the focus of most of the Democrat slurs and lies and mistruths are being directed because they just hate Ron DeSantis and they want to basically slander everyone in Florida as a bunch of racists. I actually did a poll today on my community page there, where I asked many of you, hey, I'm thinking about doing a series called Everything Democrats Believe is a Lie, right? And I said, hey, do you think I should do that? And one of the answers was yes, and the other one was, no, I think that'd be too controversial. And 97% of you, the last I checked, I have to go back and look at it again, but 97% of you said, yeah, I want you to do that. That'd be good, right? And the reason why I want to do that, because this is case in point, right? As the more I think about it, the more I think about the things that Democrats say, the things that they believe, the way they go about their political strategies, almost everything they say. No, I shouldn't amend it with almost. Everything they say is a lie. It's hard to believe not to, because this is case in point. Now, for those of you who are not properly oriented, let me get you up to speed. I'll read this article from the New York Post. It says, a new curriculum for African American history approved by the Florida Board of Education includes a lesson that teaches slavery had, quote, personal benefits, unquote. The board unanimously approved the education program at a Wednesday meeting in Orlando after a tense, more than hour-long period of public comment, the Tallahassee Democrat reported. The lessons angered teachers and activists who argued they omitted key facts about the oppression of Black Americans and the realities of slavery. While the goals for public middle school teachings include the, quote, history and evolution of slave codes, unquote, a proposed lesson also asked instructors to show students, quote, how slaves developed skills which, in some instances, could be applied for their personal benefit. Now, it is that last statement that got everyone up in arms. And so, That's the statement itself. Now, if you just let that wash over you, just take it in. I assume all of you speak English. I assume you have a solid command of the English language and the inherent words spoken there. I don't know if you got from those words, which is, quote, how slaves developed skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit, that somehow morphed into slavery was a net good. Slavery was a net benefit. Okay, maybe you're one of those people. Maybe you see things that aren't there and whatever. But we're going to let this gentleman who actually, a Black man, by the way, who actually helped develop some of the curriculum, and we're going to let him say in his own words what he thinks that means.
Let me just ask you first your reaction to the intense backlash you've seen after your 13-person group. I understand it's, 6 minorities, 6 whites, 1 unknown. That's what we were told on the racial makeup. But a diverse group of professionals gets together and to come up with this thoughtful curriculum. And it's to the point where you have the Vice President of the United States making an emergency trip down to Jacksonville, Florida to condemn it.
My reaction was incredulousness. The very idea that the sentence that was being quoted refutes the charge being made against it should make it unnecessary for anyone to have to speak out about it. Grammar, for people of basic literacy, sufficiently refutes the charge. So it was incredible.
Grammar for people of basic literacy basically refutes the charge. Savage. That was savage. Because that's basically a dig at a person that he's basically saying you're an idiot if you think that what was being said needs to be explained, that it wasn't some sort of claim that slavery was a net benefit. Okay, this seems to be obvious. Let's listen to him further.
I was incredulous. I couldn't believe. But then I came to understand this really had nothing to do with the standards. It has everything to do with the larger agenda, starting with the teachers' union and their allies. And of course, carrying it to the level of the vice presidency in order to give it heft. So this agenda is to not just to affect the teaching of African American history, but to continue to impose a mantle on the entire country that accounts for slavery as the soul of America and discounts the accomplishments of America. That's what it's about. So I was incredulous. I spoke up, of course, immediately, because as you rightly cited, it is categorically false to say that we embrace the positive good school of slavery. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Right.
But that was the allegation, as if we were John C. Calhoun and Roger B. Taney. It was absolutely false.
And just so we get the audience up to speed, the agenda for students learning history in Florida, including about slavery, mentions slavery repeatedly, talks, it requires that the horrors of slavery are fully explored and taught. The thing that has caught the attention of the political left is one line. I'll read the preceding part, and then I'll read what's caused the controversy. It reads, this is SS.68.AA2.3. Examine the various duties and trades performed by slaves, e.g. agricultural work, painting, carpentry, tailoring, domestic service, blacksmithing, transportation. Not controversial. Then what is added as a clarification is instruction includes how slaves develop skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. Now, that seems a truism. That doesn't seem to me at all controversial. I remember taking a very interesting, it was a book class on like an extracurricular sort of book club at my children's school in New York City, a very woke, private, left-wing school. And we were talking about African-American history, and the African-American people in the group thought it was very important to make sure that we talked about the accomplishments of Black people in America's history, including and especially during the time of slavery, as a testament to their spirit, as a testament, right, to their resilience. So when I saw this, I said, I get it. I see exactly what they're doing. And that was the left saying that. But now it's a very different message. And just to give people a flavor, here is the Vice President of the United States criticizing this line.
Extremists pass book bans to prevent them from learning our true history. They push forward revisionist history. They decided middle school students will be taught that enslaved people benefited from slavery. They insult us in an attempt to gaslight us, and we will not stand for it.
Is there any greater example of a worthless person than Kamala Harris? When I say worthless, I don't mean in an existential sense or in a inherently worthless or whatever. She has dignity and value as a human being, but I'm talking about as an administrator, as a quote executive of the United States of America. She is completely worthless. The only time she shows up is to stoke the flames of racial tension and to cause some sort of controversy. She's accomplished precisely nothing. And I just thought I'd point that out because she is probably the least liked vice president, maybe in the nation's history, if I'm not mistaken. So that being said, what Kamala Harris is saying is such nonsense that it can hardly be put into words. I can hardly quantify how false and absurd what she's saying is. But I want to ask a very important question, which is, where is the Black church? You see, anytime these sort of accusations are made, there arises an opportunity for clarity and truth to ring out, right? And there are certain things that I oftentimes I actually give thanks for some of the wokeness because it provides such a stark contrast to the truth that those people who are sitting there kind of just bewildered at the depths of dishonesty and falsehoods being projected by many on the left. There's an opportunity for me to inject the truth into that situation and to say, hey, as a matter of fact, let's look at the gospel. Let's understand why truth matters, and this is why we preach the gospel, is why we stand on God's word, because God's word is true. It's important to preserve the truth. And you see how society quickly descends into madness when people project consistent and constant falsehoods, right? So I say, where's the black church in this situation? Because there's an element to this that is often talked about in church. And if you've been in church for any amount of time, you have seen this sort of truism stated over and over and over again. And that is, it is important for us to understand the basic difference between something that is good versus being good for us, right? What's the difference between something being good and being good for you, right? Well, there's a scripture that is often quoted, and we can recite it from heart. If you've been in church any amount of time, it's Romans 8:28. It says, and we know all things work together for the good of those who love him, that is God, for those who are called according to his purpose. Now, that's a bedrock teaching. It's one of the most important principles to understand for anybody who has faith in God, who's walking with Jesus, because that principle will come up in your life so often, because you will face so many things that are difficult and are not good, but that God promises will be good for you. This is a great sense of, there's a great sense of comfort and rest that we can derive from knowing that even things that hurt us, even things that are difficult, that they arise out of that, the goodness of God, and that God is sovereign in allowing those things to happen. So it's an important principle to understand. And there's another thing that we often quote that comes from Joseph, because Joseph was a person who was sold into slavery by his own brothers, right? Which is actually quite interesting. And it says, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. So here we have Joseph being sold by his brothers, right? And having the opportunity to say, even though you did me dirty and he suffered many, many, many years, hard labor in prison, being falsely accused of trying to rape his master's wife and all of that stuff, until he arose to being second in command in in Egypt, and actually being the person who would save Israel because he had food during a famine. Now, what's really interesting about this is the opportunity that we have in the church to leverage this truth, right? Because I think what's being, what could be derived from this, even though I am fully proclaiming that this is not actually what the writers of the curriculum are saying. They are not making some greater metaphysical claim, making some appeal to God that, hey, even though slavery happened and it was bad, it ended up working to the net benefit of the slaves' descendants, right? But I'm here to tell you today, that is what I'm saying. That is what I'm saying. I mean, at least if you stretch what's being said there, where it says, well, in some cases, slaves were able to take the skills that they learned in certain trades and use them for their personal benefit. And that is, at the micro level, at least at some level, a representative of the fact that even though slavery was bad, there were some things that happened to them that it allowed them to make progress in their life post-slavery. And they were able to use those things for their benefit. And I think that the idea that anything good came out of slavery seems to be anathema to people on the left, because they're so invested in stoking racial tension and keeping division on the basis of racial tension that they cannot allow it to be said that somehow down the road something good came out of a very evil thing. And I'm asking myself, where's the church to this? Because here's the great irony here, because what we need to do is we need to bring the temperature down of the racial tension, while we have people in the church who are aware of these scriptures, are aware of these teachings, and the great comfort that they bring, and the hope that they give to the person who is suffering difficulty and feels maybe like they've been mistreated. There's a great opportunity to inject a bedrock gospel truth into their lives, is that just because something difficult happened to you doesn't mean that it will work out to your destruction. And the great irony of the situation with Joseph is that here, very clearly, Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers. And you know, one thing that's interesting to me that the left will never, ever, ever allow to be noted is that it was other African traders, it was other African people who actually kidnapped many of the slaves and sold them to their white enslavers. Yes, most of the slaves, the majority of them, were captured and sold by their own brothers. Now imagine if the black community writ large started to take on the idea that even though slavery was evil, we can see the fact that generations following after those atrocities, after those great evils that were committed against our ancestors, look at where black people are today. We are the most prosperous and free people, free black people, that is, in the world. There is very few people in Africa doing better than the average black person. I'm not talking about the LeBron Jameses and the Michael Jordans and the Barack Obamas of the world. I'm talking about just regular old people like me. Thank God that I grew up in the projects in Section 8 housing under the tutelage of a single mother who was ill, who basically lived off of Social Security and food stamps, and now I have a graduate degree in data science. I own my own home. My wife's a stay-at-home mom. I earn enough money for her to homeschool our children. We live in a nice home. We live in a great neighborhood. I own 2 vehicles. There's no poverty anywhere in my home. There's no lack anywhere. So though it was atrocious what happened to our ancestors, we can make the claim that this worked to our good, not for the people who were slaves, but for those who came after. Now, I want to emphasize, that's not what the people who wrote the curriculum were implying. They were simply implying a simple fact. They were stating a simple fact that some slaves learned trades that they later were able to use for their own personal benefit. That's just a fact. But just like I said earlier, Democrats, if they're saying anything at all, they're lying. And all they have, and this is why I can't understand why they have this spell over black people, and specifically black people in church. I want to understand, where are you? Where are the remnants? Where are the people who will stand out against this and say, you know what, we're not going to let you sit here and stoke this racial tension. If black church leaders right now stood up and said, we're not going to let you, Kamala Harris, speak these falsehoods. We're not going to let you cause division. Hey, if there's an instance of racism and injustice that we can all get behind, we'll be right there behind you. We'll be marching and protesting, whatever the situation is. But we're not going to let you make up fake controversies. We're not going to let you twist people's words. If you understand basic grammar and basic sentence structure, it's self-evident what was being said, and nothing like slavery was good was being implied. So I want to make a challenge to you, to us in the church. What do you think, friends? Do you think that a claim can be made? And specifically, those of you who are of a darker hue, if you know what I mean, my African-American or my black friends and my watchers, do you think that it's a solid case to be made that even though our ancestors suffered, that we could say that we benefited from some of the things that happened, and that God, through his sovereignty, often provides very good things out of very difficult and bitter things, like even the crucifixion of Jesus himself. Jesus died on the cross and suffered at the hand of sinful people, but that was the greatest good that ever came upon the history of mankind, because we were all able to have access to God through his sacrifice. Can't argue that some good came out of that, even though it was pretty terrible. Well, let me know what you think, friends. If you disagree with me, I'd like to hear about it in the comments. If you do agree, let me know how it helped you. Till next time, friends, God bless you.